very warm welcome. We are so privileged to have Lele Mehlomakulu with us today. She is the founder of Empower People Solutions, a strategic human resources and organizational development company. She is also the previous HR head of Allen Gray. Lele is passionate about the development of people and organizations, particularly women, and transitioning young people in their careers. Lele is a consultant, facilitator, coach, trainer, and organizational and improvement specialist. Her topics of interest are diverse and include women in leadership, personal mastery, strategy, diversity, transformation, and a variety of HR and organizational development topics. Welcome, Lele.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What an introduction.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the quote behind you before we get started?
You know, when I was growing up, I loved my father and, the lessons that I learned from him. And he had this thing of every time I'd go to him crying about something, this is wrong or so-and-so said something to me. And I learned and eventually developed this thing, if it's going to be, it's up to you. We all can identify problems. We all can be in a conference and saying, this is a problem and that is a problem. But in actual fact, what we need to be doing is finding solutions to those problems and finding joy, like the lockdown is happening now. There's so much joy that can be found in the freedoms that it has provided, opportunities to be creative, to be innovative, to, find ways to connect with our loved ones. So it is about that. It's about not, maybe like making lemonade out of lemons. It really is about that. Not everything that is wrong needs to stay like that. We can make it fruitful.
Beautiful. And you're such a testimony to creating life on your terms and diving into uncharted territory. You're a woman of power. And to orientate our listeners to this masterclass today, it will be divided into two parts. Part one is all about your first job, and part two will be all about the world of work. And Lele, speaking of creating life on your terms and taking the path less traveled, if you could travel back in time to when you started your first job, what advice would you give yourself?
I get this question often, and it's a funny one because I remember exactly when I started. You tend to think that you're the first graduate. You forget that everybody's been there before and you're hungry and you're going to teach people things. When in actual fact, the most important thing to do when you start a new job is to do exactly that. It's to take time to pause and to learn from people, and that's what they want from you. We have this image that we're there to impress and to show how much we know. And the people whom we begin working with, take pride in teaching you, in showing you the ropes and seeing that you're open to learning and to, yes, of course, they want to see you implement what you've learned from varsity, your life experiences. But they also want you to take time to pause and to learn. And one of the most important things that set me for life, I think, is knowing how to network. There's nothing wrong with knocking on the door of the CEO if the door is open. Hopefully it's open. Knocking on the door of the CEO, introducing yourself and having, chats with him during lunch or whoever it is that you believe that you can learn from, and ask questions as you go along. Now, what tends to happen is I find this especially so with girls, that they're so afraid to do the networking. Males are not. They walk in, hey, I'm so and so, and this is what I'm good at. And girls are afraid because they think that it's too forward. When it's not, you want somebody who's going to be able to speak for you when you're not in a room. When they're having their talent management discussions or talking about who's great, you want somebody who's going to represent you when you're not in the room. And I have a saying, when people invite me to talk about millennials at work, I say, we raised these children like this. It's time to manage them. But we battle to manage the kids the way that we raised them. And so we stifle the courage that sometimes is there. So much as I'm saying that you need to learn, it's also important to retain the courage and the confidence that you had walking in. There will be people who, for various reasons, might make you feel a little bit tinier than you already feel when you walk in. And that makes it difficult to then ask those questions that I'm saying you need to ask. Keep your confidence, keep your head high. You're going to make mistakes. Ask questions and learn. And be with people who are going to help you further your career positively.
Absolutely. I think the key thing that you started touching on there was that willingness and that hunger to learn and to continue learning.
Yeah.
To ask questions and to be resilient when you face situations where you find yourself collapsing or becoming smaller.
Yes.
And the distinction, as you mentioned, between women who are more hesitant to ask for what they need or to quit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And before we get started on the next section, in terms of everything that's related to getting your first job, what would you say are the top considerations when considering a career?
I'm going to say something that, you probably have heard before, and it's because there's a truth in it. You have to do something that you love. A lot of people get into jobs because it's a job. When you choose a career, you've got to choose something that you want to wake up doing. Something that when you're at a braai and somebody asks you what you do, you're not ashamed to say what it is that you do. And don't look at it as a job. There must be purpose in that. There's this story that they tell of John F. Kennedy going to NASA and asking the janitor, the cleaner, what is it that you do? And the guy's response was that I'm helping put a man on the moon. He didn't say I clean. He didn't say, that's my job. He spoke about why he was there, because everybody's purpose at NASA obviously is to send people to the moon, amongst other things. And we also tend to be influenced a lot by how we perform at school. If you've got great marks, you'll have your teachers and friends and everybody telling you you've got to become a lawyer, you've got to be a doctor. Not every straight A student needs to become a lawyer. You could become something else that's totally unrelated to the fact that you're an A student or whatever student. So follow the path that makes you happy, that makes you proud, and think about Sunday before the Monday going to work. Are you feeling jitters because you don't like your job, or are you excited to go to work on Monday?
Follow what makes you happy and what makes you proud.
Exactly. How are you going to be putting a man on the moon?
Sage advice. So getting into part one, around getting your first job. A lot of the students have expressed concern that they may not find with their first job a position that aligns well with their studies. And in a case like this, should you consider settling for something else entirely?
So in the first instance, actually, not in the second instance, when you're looking for a job, and I'm glad that companies are beginning to get this right. Generally, it's our fault in the people management fraternity. We take you through these aptitude tests and we tell you that you're going to be a social worker or an analyst or whatever, and you think that's the job that you're going to die doing, and that's the job that you must find. Unfortunately, it forces children to miss on opportunities to actually apply the skills that they have learned. Jobs are about skill and not necessarily about qualification. And that's what you're going to be selling, an ability to do something rather than the qualification that you have. Yes, they're going to look at that. That's the first thing. That's the first thing that introduces you to a company. So when you're looking for a job, you won't necessarily find the job that you studied for. If you studied social work, you won't necessarily become a social worker, but you could be somebody in an organization that requires the skills of a social worker. If you're an engineer, you could become an analyst because you have learned the skills to analyze. If you've done math, you could become a data analyst or whatever. I mean, there's many jobs for many skills. So don't look at your qualifications alone. Look at the skills that are required for a job. And that's what you should be going for. And as I said, luckily, a lot of organizations are beginning to find value in that. You've got engineers who are HR executives. You've got somebody who studied marketing who's an employee brand executive, or various other roles that are not related to what they studied. So find jobs where your skills are required.
And Lele, you have a particularly interesting story with what you studied being quite different to where you ended up. Could you share, because you're a beautiful example of this, could you share a bit about your academic background versus where you ended up?
Exactly. So I am a maths graduate, and all of my life I never went into jobs that required maths alone as a skill. I started in people development, my first job when I worked in the Institute of Behavioral Sciences at the police. And that's how my career progressed, using my skills of understanding people, being interested in people, being interested in the development of people. And what it did, it set me apart as an HR executive, because I was an HR executive who had a diverse array of skills that enabled me to do my job much better than what people tend to expect of an HR person. I think I was a surprise to many people. Oh, wow, she knows how to operate an Excel sheet. Oh, wow, she knows how to analyze information using numbers. She can tell a story using numbers that makes sense and makes us want to implement the recommendations that she has put through. I have no HR qualification whatsoever, and yet that's what I've been doing all of my life, and that's what I still do to this day, because I recognized earlier on, and the bosses who gave me my first job realized earlier on the type of skill that I would be bringing into my work.
You are a perfect example of being able to match passion, skills, and experience.
100%. Wow. I've experienced it, and that's why I can speak about it so passionately. I've seen it work. The person who replaced me when I left Alan Gray also has never worked in HR. And in fact, my 10-man HR team, none of them had an HR qualification. Had a medical doctor, had BCom graduates, and I even had a doctorate in psychology in the team. None of the people were HR qualified. And yet we ran the best run HR department in the country.
Wow. I think you are giving so many students hope, because there have been some questions around, emerging careers, what happens if I veer, which definitely ties into the next question. And that is, you have already answered in a sense, but is it okay to embark on this degree if it's not aligned, or to embark on a career not aligned to your degree the first time around?
It is. And what is important is, social media doesn't help much, and I feel sorry for the young ones, because people are chasing the influencers and what influencers are doing and what people say about certain people in, certain careers. And so you become a prisoner to the thought that I must become an investment banker because people speak so beautifully about investment bankers, when perhaps your passion is something else or your strength is something else. And you make yourself feel so little because you're not the investment banker that's being celebrated that week. When HR felt like me, you could be an excellent head of HR that people speak about all week long, every month and every year, and invite to come and provide thought leadership in certain topics, because you're focusing on what you know and what you can shine in and be great in and be proud about, and sell to the world as something that is valuable. So certainly, there's nothing wrong with veering from the field of study. And recently, a lot of people are doing it successfully so. You even have doctors who go and pursue a musical career, people are doing it.
It is very hopeful and I think an inspiring time for many. And like you said, companies are recognizing it, which is really exciting. And I've heard that job descriptions are also being phased out slowly but surely. And it's more around the skill set, like you said.
Yeah.
But that being said, how do you actually determine if you are a good fit for a company or a position that you are curious about working in?
You know what I did one time? I'm not going to mention the company where I was going for an interview. I arrived an hour early and I interviewed the receptionist. I asked them about the company, what it feels like working there, and so you need to ask the people who work there what their experiences are. Now, everybody's going to have a different experience. You're going to have people who are happy, who are not happy, depending on what their experience is in that organization. So you have to do your homework very thoroughly. The website will also give you information, but the most important information is going to be coming from the mouths of the people who've worked there. Be very discerning of who it is that you're speaking to and what information that they give you, because I could be happy because I've been promoted all the time and I give you all these glorious anecdotes about what the company can do for you, which might not be an experience that you would have if you were to join the company. Somebody else might give you the opposite. So interview as many people as you can who've worked there. Do your research, check on their websites, newspaper articles about the organization, because, Steinhoff, BBS, you'll get a lot of information about what kind of company that is. And stop chasing prestige. Not everybody can be, or can only mention brands because then I'll be biased, but brands do not make for a happy marriage if you're not aligned. Find an organization that you're best aligned with, where there's a good fit for what they're wanting to do for the world and what you're wanting to do for the world. People take that for granted. And a lot of people will tell you that eventually they left jobs without any options. You don't know what you're going to be earning next month, simply because the value misalignment was so huge. So it's very important. So it means that you've got to be very clear on what you value and what's important in your life, and make sure that you find a company that speaks to that. Company's not going to change for you however great you are. You're going to have to assimilate, and you don't want to be assimilating too much that you lose a sense of who you are at heart.
Wow. You touch on something so important. It's actually an inside-out job rather than finding the company and then reflecting later. It's reflecting on your values and what's important to you ethically first.
Yeah.
And then going out into the world.
Exactly. And I mean, I do not mean to minimize the issues of, I need to find a job and make money. By all means, you can do that. But once you settle, start, earning your space in the right company. Start earning that. Do the best job that you can do, even if it's a job that you hate. Do the best that you can, working towards being in an organization that you actually, resonate with.
Absolutely, because reputation and attitude is everything. Like you said, even if you hate the job,
your
reputation will follow.
Yeah, until you find something that you like. And sometimes the organization might be good today, but 5 years later, the organization has changed, has grown, or it has shrunk, and decisions are being made that no longer suit who you are. Even at that time, no matter how much they're throwing at you in terms of money and all the trinkets, be very discerning, because you don't want to kill your spirit. It's the worst feeling ever. I've been there, I know.
And now, focusing on the outer, you have sat as head of HR of Allan Gray, one of the biggest financial services company in South Africa.
Yeah.
What are the soft skills that employers are looking for, would you say, in 2020 and beyond?
So, I mean, the lockdown has made people wake up to this whole thing. People want people who are going to help companies make money. So that means you're solving problems, all right? That means that you're thinking very critically about what is it that it will take for this company to grow and to move forward and to make the profits that it requires. I'm not going to make a statement. Companies exist because they want to make profit, unless you're working for an NGO or an NPO. Companies exist to make profit, and they want people who are going to help them come up with products and services that enable them to do that. So problem solving and critical thinking skills, and being able to think outside of the box, being very innovative and creative. And while a lot of organizations, especially financial services, there's a lot of individualism where people work in competition with one another, collaboration is required, because you all at the end of the day aiming for the achievement of a certain objective of the organization and not of yourself. So collaboration is very important. The fourth thing that is important is being able to lead yourself. So forget about leading other people. Yes, we require that, and that requires a lot of emotional intelligence. But it first requires an ability to be able to manage yourself and to lead yourself, which then means, going back to what we said, you have to be very clear on who you are and what you're about. Because you cannot do emotional intelligence without doing some self-introspection and understanding who you are. You've got to be able to communicate. That's been the case since, I don't know, the first job ever, wherever, before Christ, after Christ, I don't know. You've got to be able to clarify expectations. You've got to be able to provide feedback. You've got to be able to tell people what it is that you expect of them, communicate client requirements. So clarity in terms of how you speak, and I'm not talking about your accent or whatever. The language that you use has got to be very clear, straight and to the point, including writing skills. There's a lot of courses that are out there: business communication, writing skills. And then perhaps the most important thing, especially in organizations that serve clients, is that you've got to be service-oriented. You've got to understand that the client does come first. And it does require sometimes that you kind of let go of definitely let go of your pride, and understand what the client or customer wants and give it to them. And we spoke about emotional intelligence and ability to understand yourself and how you impact other people.
So it's definitely bringing the world of hard skills and soft skills together and doing some of the deep soul searching that's required for the inner soft skills, and also doing what you can to equip yourselves with the hard skills that you may not have, like writing and things like that. And luckily there's so many free courses available now too, and the internet is full of information.
Absolutely. And you know what? I don't say this often, but it's the truth. I learned a lot of what I know, and I became so good at my job because I read a lot. So, for instance, I'll see something on TV. I'm looking at the TV now, it says tomorrow's forecast, and I don't know what the word forecast means. And I go, and either Wikipedia tells me forecast, tells me the history and whatever. And before long, you've read 25 pages of different other things that you now know that you didn't know before. And it helps you think critically. It helps you find solutions, because now you know a whole host of things that university didn't teach you, that your manager possibly didn't teach you and cannot teach you because perhaps they're not as well read. So be curious. I tell my children that all the time. Just be curious about things. Why a plastic bottle and not a glass bottle? Why do we write instead of speak? why are we solving this problem in this manner and not the other? What can I do with a newspaper? Because much as you gain muscle through doing exercise, you gain brain muscle through giving it exercise, through reading, doing puzzles, and that type of thing.
So that's definitely something important to set yourself apart, is to continue to be curious to read.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, Lele, could you tell us what are other things that students could do to set themselves apart when preparing for their first job or the world of work?
Yeah. You've got to think hard about what the problems are that exist. So you're going to be taught this is how you do something, step 1, step 2, step 3. Think hard about, is that the best process? Perhaps there's, another process that we can use that's perhaps faster and more efficient. So think very hard about problems and solve problems for the organization. People will accept them, people will tell you to shut up and whatever, but after a while, people will realize what you're about and they will soon be coming to you to solve those problems. You might be the first person ever in that organization who gets promoted after 6 months being on the job because you solve problems. You don't just follow the herd. And that requires that you have learned, that you have asked questions to the right people. And the most important thing, I'm repeating this probably for the 3rd or the 4th time. So girls, don't forget it, network. You have to network, right? Because when you're networking, you're communicating with people, you're learning from them, you're learning their language, you're learning what they know. It's almost like a process of osmosis. And it can only happen if you're in touch with the people who have the knowledge that you seek. So do network. Do not be afraid of people telling you that you're trying to sound and be clever, because that is exactly what you're trying to do, sound and be clever. And that's what the organization wants. And the people criticizing you are generally people who are not necessarily doing the greatest of jobs. They're the people at the printer, at the water cooler, who know who's bad, who's got problems, but they themselves are not succeeding. So you don't want to be part of that. Stay away from the water cooler, stay away from the shared printer, stay learning. And you also have to take care of yourself holistically, so spiritually, emotionally, physically, psychologically. You've got to take care of yourself. Go to gym, get hugs from people, eat well, and do all the right things that are required to make sure that holistically, that means all of you is okay, not just the brain, but all of you, physically, spiritually. Join a yoga class, a spiritual group, go to church, pray, whatever it takes to ensure that you are a full-on healthy person.
I love that aspect into it. Thank you so much for touching on that. And the very practical solving problems, which makes profit, which means, like you said, ultimately, if you solve problems, you get promoted. And networking is also another key skill to have and something to keep doing.
Yeah. And the reason it's important is not only are you learning, especially in huge organizations, decision makers are not going to know everybody, right? And yet they do make decisions about everybody. So it then becomes important for you that you're in somebody's mind when those decisions are being made, that somebody thinks about you when it is required to think about who's going to be in a project that's going to set you for life, for your future. So that's why you network. It's not just to learn, but it's also to ensure that other people get to know about you and they are your spokespeople, as I said, when you're not in the room. Now, one of the things that I do is I study courage, among other things. And it's there's a lot of most important things, but it's one of the critical things that you also need to maintain, that when everybody else is thinking this is not the way to go. You've got to have enough courage to say, I'm going to try this thing, even though I might fail. Because if you don't try anything, you're going to be that person. They ask the question, how many times have you failed? And you say, I've never failed. And we look at you and we think, that's probably because you never tried anything. So you've got to have the courage to try things, even in spite of the fear that you might fail, because people will be there to help you. And people will recognize that you are trying rather than see you not have the courage to try new things. It doesn't mean that you absolve yourself of accountability when you do wrong things. So humility is required as well. And they're not opposites of each other. Courage and humility are not opposites. They complement each other very well. So, yeah.
Yes, I know on your website, and I'll place it in the resources list, you offer workshops and you are a facilitator also of Brene Brown's work. So
that's correct.
You lead important conversations around having courageous conversations.
Yeah.
So I will definitely be placing more information on that in the resources guide for students so they can see what you offer and also the work that you have studied that makes you an expert in this field.
Exactly. I mean, we do, it is about helping people to show up and to live courageous lives.
Absolutely. Yes. So more of that to come. And before we close part 1, I'm going to change track a bit and move on to skills. And that is, how can the students identify and apply their academic and personal skills to the workplace?
As I said before, it's exactly about that, and you said, companies are moving away from job descriptions. Is think about what is the output that is required of me? What is it that they're trying to get out of me? And it's usually solving a certain problem. It's not just ticking off the boxes and whatever. Initially, when they're teaching you, that's what it's about. So it's about thinking which man is going to the moon this week, and how are we going to do that? How do we solve the problems that exist? Think beyond just your job. And there's nothing wrong with thinking about somebody else's job, so long as you're doing yours very well. There's nothing wrong with thinking about what's happening in a different department. I mean, departments collaborate all the time. So get beyond your job description and get within solving problems.